Don't fold them. That's all she said. No yelling this time. Just those 3 words, spit through gritted teeth while I knelt on the lawn, folding my damp jeans like a hotel housekeeper. She was standing barefoot in the doorway, wearing his hoodie, the one I'd never seen before last week. The sleeves were too long for her. And still, somehow, I was the one who looked out of place. Rain was in the air, but it hadn't started yet. The sky just hovered, heavy and unsure. Kind of like me. A plastic hanger bounced off the concrete behind me. I didn't flinch. I folded my shirt slower. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. Funny. I wasn't the one who tossed a man's entire wardrobe across the lawn at 7:13 a.m. I wasn't the one who screamed at the top of her lungs in a suburban neighborhood where everyone pretends they're not watching. I wasn't the one who texted, "We'll talk later," and then changed the locks. So I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up the last pair of socks, the striped ones she once bought me on a random Tuesday just because they looked like me, and placed them gently into my old duffel bag. Then I stood up, zipped it shut, and smiled. That's when her face cracked. Not with tears, not with regret, just confusion, genuine confusion. Like she didn't expect me to have anything left. Like she was waiting for me to plead, collapse, or scream. But I didn't. I just looked at her one more time, then walked down the driveway without saying a word. No goodbye. No take care. No you'll regret this. I drove away. Not far, just a few blocks. Far enough for her to think I'd finally snapped. That I'd finally accepted what she'd been hinting at for months in between slammed doors and cold dinners. But what she didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that while she spent the last 3 months pretending to be subtle, I had already been preparing my exit. Joint account? Already flagged. Shared credit lines? Transferred and timed. Business accounts? Frozen with the click of a button. She thought throwing my clothes on the grass was her power move. She had no idea the game had already ended last Tuesday, when I moved the final savings bond out of her reach. So when the bank called her 7 days later and asked why multiple auto payments bounced, and why the secondary account holder had initiated a legal freeze on their mortgage, she finally called me, 12 times, and texted, "Darren, please, we need to talk." I didn't reply, because I was already writing this. It took me a full minute to realize what I was hearing. At first, it was just background noise, the rustling of fabric, maybe a door shutting. Then a low voice, muffled but close. Then her voice. Not angry, not sad, just nervous. The voicemail had started while she was in mid-conversation. She hadn't meant to call me. It was one of those accidental pocket dials, the kind you regret before you even hang up. Only she never knew it happened. I didn't listen to it until the 3rd day after I left. I was at a cheap roadside motel 40 minutes outside town. The kind of place where the TV remote is chained to the nightstand and the vending machine hums louder than the cars on the highway. I wasn't sleeping much, and part of me, the weak part, kept checking my phone, expecting some kind of message, maybe even an apology, or at least a fake, manipulative olive branch. But there was nothing. Not until that voicemail. I replayed it 4 times. Each time, I picked up more. He just left. No fight, nothing. Like he was planning it. A pause. Some indistinct shuffling. You said he wouldn't do anything. That he'd just cry or beg or wait for me to come back. Silence. Then, no, he didn't touch the account yet. I think we're okay. That last sentence was the one that made my hands shake. Because I had touched the account. She just didn't know it yet. She and Graham. And yes, it was definitely his voice I heard in the background. Thought I'd be the same fool I'd been for years. The one who fixed the printer, paid the bills, and offered back rubs when her migraines always happened after late work events. They didn't realize I'd spent the last month collecting evidence. Not dramatic stuff. No secret photos. No dramatic confrontations. Just trails. Activity logs. Forgotten shared documents. Payment confirmations. App logins she never remembered I had access to. Every lie she whispered while standing 3 feet away from me was already preserved in screenshots, timestamps, and digital receipts. And most importantly, I had legally started the process of splitting everything, from our joint checking to the Roth IRA her uncle helped her open back when she still believed in forever. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want to ruin her. I just wanted out, with my dignity, my name, and my share of the life we built. But listening to that voicemail, hearing her laugh, that subtle, mocking laugh she'd once saved for rom-coms and inside jokes, made something shift. She wasn't just done with me. She had planned this. With someone else. Down to the timing, the fake tears, the explosive performance on the lawn. She didn't snap. She scripted it. And that's when I realized I'd been playing a part in her show for months. Maybe longer. But the credits were rolling now, and I was finally off stage. I didn't respond to the voicemail. I didn't call back. I just sent one email, not to her, but to the lawyer she didn't know I had already retained. I attached the transcript, the bank history, the revised will, and a note that said, "Let's move ahead." 2 days later, her messages started. "Hey, can we talk?" I didn't mean everything I said. "Where are you staying? Can we meet somewhere private?" Then, "Please." I didn't know the bank would actually call me. "They said you froze everything?" She was unraveling, and I wasn't even close to finished. It started with a card on my windshield. No return address. Just a plain white envelope tucked under the wiper of my car. The same Honda I'd parked behind a library in the next town over to avoid anyone I knew. It wasn't even somewhere she'd expect me to be, which means someone else told her. Someone I hadn't thought to watch. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note in that all-too-familiar slanted handwriting. "Let's talk. I don't want this to end ugly." Below that, a Starbucks gift card. How generous. And a little scribble of a heart next to her name, M. I stared at it for a while, then turned it over and checked the back. She hadn't even scratched off the code. That meant she didn't care if I used it. It wasn't peace, it was bait. A soft little trap wrapped in fake nostalgia. I didn't bite. That night, she called again, 3 times in a row. Then silence. Then a voicemail. "Darren, please don't freeze the brokerage account. I don't care about the other stuff, just don't touch that one, okay? I'm sorry, all right. We should have just had a conversation. I wasn't trying to hurt you." That was the moment I knew she didn't miss me. She missed the safety net. See, the brokerage account wasn't just savings. It was her cushion, her emergency exit. It was tied to a small condo we co-owned, something we'd bought before the marriage, rented out all these years, and agreed to sit on until retirement. She'd been pulling rent from it quietly into her personal account. I let it slide, stupidly, because I thought we were a team. What she didn't expect was for me to lock that too. Legally. Cleanly. No drama. The lawyer made sure every move I made was within my rights. I wasn't storming into battle. I was dismantling the structure brick by brick, and she didn't notice until the floor disappeared beneath her. And that's when Graham made his appearance. I hadn't seen him in person before. Just the name, the voice on the voicemail, the tagged photo from the art gallery's Instagram page that I screenshotted and never mentioned. But then he walked right into my hiding spot like a character who didn't know he was in the wrong story. I was sipping coffee at a gas station cafe. Cheap coffee, no sugar, trying to clear my head. He walked in, paused, stared at me like I was supposed to vanish, then smiled like a man who'd already won. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, like we were ex-co-workers meeting by accident. I didn't say anything. I just kept stirring the bitter coffee like it was going to answer something for me. He sat down anyway. "Look, Darren, I know things are messy right now, but I wanted you to know it wasn't personal." I actually laughed. Not loud. Just one of those bitter scoffs that slips out before your brain can stop it. "Sleeping with my wife wasn't personal?" He shrugged. "I mean, things happen. Mindy said you guys were done for a long time. She told me you were." Pathetic. I cut in. He paused, then looked down. "No, just checked out." She needed someone who saw her. That word, saw, made something inside me snap. Because I did see her. I saw everything. I just stayed silent. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, even when I knew doubt was all I had left. I saw her spiraling. I saw her lying. I saw her changing right in front of me, and I kept pretending it was temporary. That love would fix it. That if I cooked enough dinners, or said yes to enough plans, or stayed quiet long enough, she'd come back around. But she never left me because I was absent. She left me because I was available. And Graham? He was just her plan B. But now that plan A walked off with the financial keys, plan B wasn't looking so stable. Before he left, he said something that stuck with me. "She's scared, man. And not of losing you. Of losing the lifestyle." That told me everything. It wasn't heartbreak she was experiencing. It was inconvenience. So I left the cafe, went back to my motel, and opened a folder I hadn't touched in weeks, the one with the updated terms of our asset split. It was time to make one last move. One she couldn't undo with a phone call or a Starbucks card. I hadn't spoken to my mom in 3 weeks. Not because of her, but because I didn't want to explain the situation. She loved Mindy. Always had. Called her my second daughter, and meant it. When I used to come over alone, she'd ask where her girl was before she even asked how I was doing. It was painful, like watching your own family hold the knife you're already bleeding from. So I stayed quiet. I didn't want to see her face when I told her Mindy cheated. I didn't want to watch her defend someone who had gutted our marriage behind a glass of Cabernet and some boutique gallery events. I didn't want to be pitted, not by the woman who raised me to believe that real love just needs time. But apparently Mindy had no problem going to her. I was driving back from the lawyer's office when my mom called. I almost didn't pick up. But the second I heard her voice, that careful, too soft voice she uses when something's wrong, I knew something had happened. "Honey," she said slowly, "Mindy stopped by this morning." My stomach turned instantly. She said she was worried about you, that you were going through something, that maybe you weren't thinking clearly. I pulled the car over. My hands were already sweaty. She said you were making impulsive decisions. She said you were trying to hurt her out of spite, that you emptied the accounts in a panic. That last part lit a fuse, because none of what I did was impulsive. It was precise, documented, legally sound. I hadn't touched anything that wasn't mine, and frankly, I'd left her more than I should have. "She asked me to talk to you," my mom added. "Said maybe if I called, you'd cool off." I stayed silent for a long time, just breathing, processing. My wife, the woman who humiliated me, lied to me, and shoved me out like I was the one who broke us, had just shown up on my mother's doorstep, wrapped herself in a wounded act, and tried to twist the only person left who might still believe in her. And the thing is, it almost worked, because my mom, sweet, loyal, hopeful, started asking questions I didn't expect. Were you really planning to freeze everything? Did you maybe overreact? Was there someone else involved? Or is this just a misunderstanding? It crushed me. Not because she doubted me. I get it. She didn't know the details. But because Mindy had done this exact thing to me for years. Make a mess, then act like I overreacted for noticing. Deny, then deflect. Always calm, always reasonable sounding, always just wounded enough to draw sympathy without ever admitting fault. "I have the receipts, Mom," I finally said, my voice cracking. Receipts. Screenshots. Voice messages. Transaction histories. Timelines. I know who he is. I know how long it's been going on. I know she planned it. The line went quiet. Then my mom whispered, "She didn't mention any of that." Of course she didn't. Because Mindy wasn't trying to clear the air. She was trying to poison the well, make me look like the unstable one before I could tell my side. She had always been good at that. Charming, careful with words. She could sound like the victim even while pulling the strings. But I had one advantage now. I didn't care if people believed me anymore. Not even my mom. I didn't need allies. I had evidence. I ended the call politely. Told her I'd send her everything if she wanted to see it, but that I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't defend myself. I was done begging for people to see what was obvious. And that's when I decided to make my move public. Not explosive. Not vengeful. Just final. I sent the legal notification to Mindy's work email. Formal language. No emotion. The subject line read, "Notice of final partition and revocation of shared rights." Inside the email, my lawyer attached every document she needed to see. The division of assets, the freeze order, the pending removal of her name from the condo, the credit report updates, and the tax separation forms. I CC'd only one person, her father. Why? Because he was the one who told me, 5 years ago, "If you ever have issues with her, don't talk to me. Handle it like a man." Well, here I was, handling it. And the best part? I didn't even have to explain it. Because the moment she opened that email and saw the timeline of transactions, the list of lies, the legal language she couldn't charm her way out of, she finally understood. I wasn't the one who lost control. I was the one who had been in control the entire time. It didn't take her long to reply. Less than 3 hours after I sent the legal notification, my phone buzzed. Not a call, not a message, but an email. That alone told me she was playing a different game now. When Mindy writes, it's calculated. When she calls, it's reactive. So when I saw the subject line, I already knew something had shifted. We need to reconsider how we're doing this. No greeting. No apology. Not even a fake attempt to sound regretful. The body of the email was short. Maybe 50 words at most. But one sentence stood out. The one that made my stomach tighten in a way nothing else had so far. You may want to think about how your actions will affect people who still care about their reputations, including your mother. There it was, the mask slipping. She wasn't asking anymore. She was warning. Now, to anyone else, that line might sound vague, passive-aggressive at worst, but I knew exactly what she meant. Mindy came from a family of image keepers. Her father was an old-school investor, a big name in local real estate circles. Her mother was a charity board climber. Appearances mattered more than truth ever did. Everything had to be curated, from family photos to amicable divorces. I wasn't just disrupting our marriage. I was threatening the myth of who they were. But dragging my mother into it? That was new. And it hit me hard, because I kept my mom out of everything. After that call, I stopped giving her updates. I didn't want her stuck in the crossfire. She had enough going on with her health. She didn't need lawyers, accusations, or power plays. But Mindy had gone to her once. And this line, it felt like she was planning to do it again. Or worse, use her. I stared at the email for a long time. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it to my lawyer. I just sat in that silence, feeling the familiar guilt creep back in. The guilt she was so good at pulling from me, like a string she never cut. She didn't need facts. She just needed me to feel like the bad guy, like the unstable one, the emotional one, the man who overreacts. And part of me almost fell for it. Again. But then I remembered something my brother told me when this all began. One night, while I was sleeping on the fold-out couch in his cabin, half laughing, half crying through a bottle of cheap whiskey, he looked at me and said, "She doesn't miss you, Dee. She misses the version of you that was easy to manage." That line stayed with me, like it had been stitched into my ribs. Because Mindy never wanted a partner. She wanted a buffer, someone to absorb her chaos without ever reflecting it back. And when I stopped playing that role, she didn't try to fix it. She replaced it. So, no, I wasn't going to reply to her email. Instead, I documented it, took screenshots, printed them, put them in the binder I now kept beside my bed like a war journal. Every message, every transaction, every false statement. All time-stamped. Already. Because I was preparing for something I hadn't wanted until now. A court battle. Not because I craved revenge, but because now I knew she wasn't just trying to protect herself. She was willing to destroy anything in her way. Even my mother. And that's when the second email came. This time, from someone I hadn't heard from in years, Amanda. She and I had dated back in college. Briefly. Nothing serious. Nothing ugly. We parted ways, stayed Facebook friends, liked the occasional post. She married someone else. Moved 3 states away. I hadn't thought about her in forever. But the subject line hit like a brick. "We need to talk. It's about Mindy." Inside. One line. She reached out to me. Said you'd been unstable since the split and that I might hear from your lawyer. "Darren, what's going on?" I felt like I couldn't breathe. Mindy had reached out to my ex-girlfriend, a woman she barely knew, to discredit me. Preemptively. Publicly. Carefully. She wasn't fighting a legal battle. She was building a narrative. I sat in that motel room for hours, staring at the screen, wondering how deep this went. How many other people had gotten a version of the story where I was the villain, where she was the misunderstood wife, the victim of a man who just couldn't handle her ambition. And that's when I made a decision I hadn't considered before. If she wanted to weaponize the past, fine. Then I'd show her just how much of it I had archived. There's a certain kind of folder you keep in the back of a file cabinet, not because you need it, but because you're afraid one day you might. Mine was labeled New Haven, 2013. It hadn't been opened in years. It was shoved behind tax documents and warranty receipts in an old IKEA drawer I hadn't touched since we moved into our 3rd rental. And even then, I only kept it because something about it felt unfinished. It was Mindy's mess. Long before the lies, before Graham, before the condo, before any of it looked like a marriage. And it started with a missing $3,400 check. Back then, Mindy had just graduated with her arts degree. She was working part-time at a community gallery while doing freelance marketing for a friend's startup. I had just started a job at a print logistics company. We were broke, like split pasta 3 nights a week broke. That summer, she got a grant. A small art award from a regional nonprofit for a concept piece she pitched during college. I remember how excited she was, how she danced barefoot around the apartment when the envelope came. I remember because I took pictures. She cried, said it was her first real win. But a week later, I got a call from the grant committee. They said Mindy had submitted a second application under a different name. At first, I thought they were mistaken. But the second name? It was Margaret Fielding, her grandmother's maiden name. They asked if I knew anything about it. I didn't. So I asked Mindy. She denied it. Completely. Said it was probably someone stealing her idea. She even faked being upset. I believed her, like an idiot. I defended her in emails. I told the committee she wouldn't do something like that. They dropped it quietly, probably to avoid attention, but the second $3,400 check never came. I kept the letters, the emails, even the blurry scan of the fake submission that someone leaked anonymously. It matched her handwriting, her style. The entire Margaret portfolio used sketches I'd seen in our sketchbooks. But I let it go. I told myself it wasn't my battle to fight, that people make mistakes, that maybe it really was just a misunderstanding. But now I knew exactly who I had married. She didn't lie out of desperation. She lied out of design. So I pulled the folder from storage, scanned the documents, and sent a copy to my lawyer. Not as revenge, as insurance. Because if she was contacting people from my past to shape a narrative, I needed something real to anchor the truth. Something more than text messages and hurt feelings. My lawyer called within an hour of reading it. His tone was different, sharper. "Darren," he said, "this isn't just a personal defense file. This is reputation damaging. Professional. Legal. If she's positioning herself publicly, this changes the game." I didn't want to use it. God, I didn't. Even after everything, some broken part of me still wanted to protect the girl who danced barefoot for a grant check and kissed me with pain on her fingers. But that girl was long gone. What remained was someone I didn't recognize, someone who saw relationships like stages and people like props. And now that I'd stepped off script, she was scrambling to rewrite the ending. But this next scene, it wouldn't be hers to write. That night, I sent one email. Again, not to her. I sent it to the Arts Alliance Board, CCNG, the 3 original committee members whose names I still had from 10 years ago. The subject line read, "Former grant recipient misconduct. Confidential historical clarification." I attached everything. Clearly. Professionally. No emotion. No commentary. Just facts. I signed it anonymously, but they'd know. That's the thing about old skeletons. They creak when you drag them out, no matter how quiet you try to be. Then I waited. It only took 24 hours. Mindy called me at 9:12 p.m. The first call I'd answered since leaving. Her voice cracked before she said my name. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. She kept talking. Panicked. Shaking. "They called me. The board. They're opening an investigation. You don't know what you've done." That's when I spoke, calm and slow. "No, Mindy. You don't know what you've done." And I ended the call. She wanted a war built on reputation. She wanted to win by perception, charm, control. But I had something stronger. Truth. And I wasn't hiding it anymore. The email wasn't meant for me. I don't say that dramatically. I mean it literally. The email was forwarded to me by mistake from an old shared account Mindy had forgotten was still synced to one of our archived Dropbox folders. The folder had long since been renamed, buried under layers of event invites, old documents, and used PDFs from when we planned a trip to Oregon and never went. But it was still there, still active. And when she updated her resume and sent it to her mentor for review, she CC'd the wrong address. One that still pinged my inbox quietly, automatically, like it had for years. At first, I thought it was just a copy of her latest job hunt materials. Maybe a reference request. But what caught my attention wasn't the resume. It was the attachment labeled statement_V3, PDF. I opened it, and then I read it. Twice. It wasn't a statement of purpose. It wasn't even a portfolio summary. It was a narrative. A full-page personal essay. In it, she wrote about the collapse of her marriage. Claimed she'd survived emotional instability, gaslighting, and financial manipulation. She painted herself as the resilient spouse of a man who couldn't handle her ambition. She wrote about how women in creative industries are often torn down by fragile egos, and how she nearly lost everything rebuilding after years of quiet psychological abuse. I stared at the screen, my pulse thudding in my ears. She had rewritten the entire relationship. From the woman who cheated, lied, weaponized my own mother, and tried to ruin my reputation, into a survivor story. And the kicker? She submitted it as part of an application for a nonprofit leadership grant. $25,000 in funding for women rebuilding after trauma. I didn't move for 10 minutes. Just stared. Sat there in the motel chair, the cheap wood pressing into my spine, the air stale and unmoving. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I opened a new tab and started searching. Within 15 minutes, I found the foundation hosting the grant. A small but influential organization, known for making press announcements about their recipients. They listed past grantees on their site, and right there in the upcoming consideration column, Mindy Fielding, finalist. She wasn't just applying. She was close to winning, and she was doing it by weaponizing our story, twisting it into something grotesque. She used pieces of the truth, my anxiety, my tendency to over-accommodate, my months of silence, and built a whole new version around them. A version where I was the villain. But what she didn't expect was for someone to read that narrative and know exactly which parts were lies, provable lies. So I picked up the phone, called my lawyer, told him I had something new. He didn't even hesitate. If she goes public with this, he said, she opens herself up to defamation liability, especially if she profits from it. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about a relationship anymore. Mindy had turned it into a brand. A personal rebranding campaign built on half-truths, buzzwords, and social currency. She didn't just want to escape the fallout. She wanted to thrive from it, monetize it, control it. But here's the thing about using lies to build a house. It might stand tall for a while, but it doesn't take much to light it on fire. So I started gathering everything. Not just the documents, but timelines, records of travel, screenshots of her messages to Graham, voicemails, dates, bank withdrawals, every piece that contradicted the story she submitted. I created a dossier. Clean, chronological, cold, and I sent it to two people. First, to the Grant Foundation, marked confidential integrity concern. Second, to her father. No message, no explanation, just the facts. By morning, my phone had exploded. Calls, emails, messages from numbers I didn't recognize. One voicemail from her father. Quiet, furious, short. We'll deal with this privately. Don't speak to anyone else. Too late. The narrative she crafted so carefully was already collapsing, and she had no clue how much further it was about to fall. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting on a bench outside a hardware store, sipping a paper cup of gas station coffee, wondering if I should finally buy that toolbox I'd been eyeing. Not because I needed one, but because I liked the idea of becoming the kind of guy who owned one. The number was unfamiliar. I let it ring out. 2 minutes later, a voicemail. I didn't even want to listen to it. I was tired. Not in the I need sleep way. Tired in the way your soul gets when you've carried someone else's weight for too long. But curiosity won. It was a woman's voice, formal but firm. Mr. Fielding, this is Clara Hastings, director of the Wilburn Foundation. Thank you for your detailed submission. After reviewing the documentation, we've decided to remove Mindy Fielding from finalist consideration for this year's grant. I assure you this will remain confidential. I hope you find peace and closure. That was it. 1 minute. No drama. No press release. No revenge. Just a door quietly closing behind her. I didn't smile. I didn't fist pump or scream justice. I just sat there, coffee cooling in my hand, breathing. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was under attack. I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I didn't even feel bitter. I just felt free. Minnie didn't contact me again. Not after the grant was pulled. Not after her father removed her access to their joint trust accounts. Not after the foundation quietly updated the board about her incident a decade ago, the one with the second identity, the forged grant application. She vanished. The way people do when the image they built begins to decay faster than they can patch it. I heard she left the city a few weeks later. Someone mentioned she was staying in upstate New York, starting over under a new brand. I didn't check. I didn't stalk. I didn't Google. I didn't care. Because I wasn't angry anymore. Somewhere between sleeping in a motel and printing screenshots in a rented storage unit, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Myself. Not the man she had to reshape. Not the version of me who apologized for things he didn't do. Not the quiet husband who folded his own clothes on the lawn while she wore another man's hoodie. Just me. I ended up renting a small cabin on the edge of Lake Marshall. A fixer-upper, but quiet. Remote enough that the nights are actually dark. I planted a few trees. I started building things with my hands. I learned to cook for one without feeling lonely. I reconnected with my mom, who, after reading every document I showed her, cried harder than I've ever seen her cry. Not because I was right, but because she finally saw how much I'd endured alone. And now? Now I wake up to silence I chose, not silence that punished me. And sometimes, on especially calm mornings, I sit on the back porch with a mug of coffee, stare at the water, and laugh at the version of myself who thought love meant losing yourself for someone else's comfort. It doesn't. Love, real love, doesn't shrink you. It expands you. And what Mindy never understood is that the version of me she tried to destroy was never weak. He was just waiting to be done pretending. So yeah, she screamed, get out of my life. And I did. And it was the best thing I've ever done.